frog বলি না, আমরা বলি amphibian experiment, amphibian cardiac experiment. This is a cardiac experiment. Amphibian nerve muscle তোমাদের অলরেডি হয়ে গেছে, তাই তো? So this is amphibian frog experiment. এভাবে আমরা করি. So some structures or props or instrument, you say anything, you can say anything. These are common. Now according to some test which we'll do, we can take some extra things or remove some extra things from here. But overall, you will need all those things. So মুখস্থ করার কোনো দরকার নেই. You don't need to mug it up. Just think about it. What are the things must be necessary for these things? Notice the setup. So first of all, you need a frog. Second, you need a scalpel. তাই তো, নাহলে কাটবে কি করে? Third, you need pins. Pins for এখানে ওটাকে ক্রুসিফাই করতে হবে জিসাস খ্রিস্টের মতো, ওখানে ওকে ক্রুসিফাই না করলে হবে না, তো ক্রুসিফাই করতে হবে, তো পিনস লাগবে। 4, ও ফ্রগ ছোট হয়, so you don't need big nails like him, you need small pins. Second, threads, okay. 5, so and also frog board, এই যে একটা board আছে, you have to put the frog over something, that's a board. Kymograph board বলতে পারো, kymograph board or frog board, you can say anything, frog board. So these things are necessary, okay. Then also these things are necessary. So what are those things? Kiki হচ্ছে গিয়ে, of course there needs to be kymograph stand, okay. 7, after kymograph stand you need a lever. Of course this kymograph stand has the lever, so আলাদা করে লেখার দরকার নেই, so with lever এখানে করে দাও, because if the lever isn't there, not LEVER, mechanical lever, okay, physics. So যদি আমরা এটা এখানে ইউজ না করি লিভারটা, দেন লিভার যদি ইউজ না করি এটা তো এইভাবে হবেই না, এর মতো মুভ করবে, এর মতো মুভ করবে, it will move individually. So you need a lever to connect two ends of a mechanical system, তোমরা এগুলো জানো, to make them work together you need always need a lever. কল যেমন আগে জল তুলতাম, এখন ওরকম কল পাওয়া যায় না, আগে টিউব কল পাওয়া যেত এইভাবে এদিকে, তাই তো, ওকে। সো সেই রকমই মেকানিজম, আমি এদিকটা টানছি ওটা উঠছে, এদিকটা ছেড়ে দিচ্ছি ওটা আবার নামছে, সিমিলারলি টিউব কল এরকম তোমরা দেখে থাকবে, গ্রামের বাড়িতে থাকে, এনিওয়ে আগে শহরে থাকতো। সো লিভার, লেট মি পুট ইট আউট, kymograph stand with lever, then you need kymograph page as well. This was the total stand, so you need this page and this is called kymograph. Okay, now third last, a few things you will need. What you will need? Electrical circuit, because to notice the electricity flowing with the frog in the frog's heart and all, you need to connect with an electrical circuit. Because electrical circuit if you won't connect, you will not notice anything, because in case of humans আমরা দেখছিলাম আলাদা করে একটা electrical circuit we are adding in multiple directions, so electrical circuit is important. So 8, electrical circuit, okay. 9, আর কি চাই, আর তোমার চাই হচ্ছে কি aneurysm needle. Of course this aneurysm needle is for destroying the frog's spinal cord, okay. এই নিডলটাই আমরা ঢুকিয়ে ওই পিঠের পেছনে ঢুকিয়ে এভাবে ডিস্ট্রয় করে দিতে হয়, সো aneurysm needle and also Symes cannula. Okay, so these things definitely you will need, okay. Now according some structure, like in some test we will be providing test for what happens when we provide extra calcium, extra sodium, or matlab the ions and some drugs like adrenaline and also acetylcholine, we'll put those things. So in those cases you can add extra instruments like CaCl2, NaCl2 according to our need, but these are the basic structures, basic things you will definitely need in case of any frog heart experiment. Bolo, kymograph stand with lever, উইথ, এটা হচ্ছে সি মানে উইথ, ঠিক আছে? এটা ওই যারা ডেসক্রিপশন লেখে ওইভাবে লেখে। বলো। কি করবে? বাঁচবে? স্পাইনাল কর্ড ডিস্ট্রয় করে তুমি তোকে মেরে দিচ্ছ না, তখনই বললাম তো, স্পাইনাল কর্ড ডিস্ট্রয় করে তুমি ওর হচ্ছে অ্যানাস্থেসিয়া টাইপের করে দিচ্ছ, বুঝতে পেরেছো? যাতে ও পেন ফিল না করতে পারে। অফকোর্স ইউ আর ডুইং আ টেস্ট অন অন অ্যান অ্যানিমাল, বাট দ্যাট ডাজন্ট মিন ইউ উইল পেইন হিম, রাইট? সো আ সেন্সেশন আমরা ডিস্ট্রয় করে দিচ্ছি, উই আর ডিস্ট্রয়িং দ্য স্পাইনাল কর্ড বাট নট দ্য ব্রেন। ব্রেন স্পাইনাল কর্ড আলাদা আলাদা হয়, তো আমরা স্পাইনাল কর্ডটা ডিস্ট্রয় করে দিই, যে সেন্সরি যে ব্যাপারগুলো হয়, সেন্সরি মোটর, ওই সেন্সরি গুলো ওটা আমরা নষ্ট করে দিচ্ছি। ওকে, মানে ওর পরে পেন দিলে ওগুলো দিলে ও আর বুঝতে পারবে না। যেমন হ্যাঁ, যেমন হিউম্যানদের ক্ষেত্রে, ওকে, হিউম্যানদের ক্ষেত্রে হয় আমরা কিছু স্পেসিফিক এরিয়া ডিস্ট্রয় করে দিলে আমাদের পেন সেন্সেশন ওইগুলো চলে যায়। তুমি যদি হাত ব্যাকে ভেঙেও দাও ও বুঝতে পারবে না, হয় ঠিক তেমনি। বাট তার মানে কি আমি মরে গেছি? নো, আই এম অ্যালাইভ বাট মাই পেন সেন্সেশন ইজ লস্ট। ওকে, সো দ্যাট দ্য ফ্রগ ইজ নট ইন পেন। ও এমনিতেই মরবে, বাট কষ্ট করার কি দরকার? So like this, so these are the things you will need. বেসিক হয়তো এগুলো অত ইম্পর্টেন্ট না, বাট জিজ্ঞেস করে বা তোমাকে লিখতে বলতে পারে যে রাইট ডাউন দ্য থিংস নেসেসারি, ওকে, ইন প্র্যাকটিক্যাল অবভিয়াসলি। So these are the things. Now we will be assessing all these things, we will be collecting all these things, put the frog like this. Now আমরা সব জিনিস জোগাড় করে ফেলেছি, frog আমার বসে গেল, electrical circuit I have connected. Now we will see some necessary properties and things of the cardiac muscles of the frog. এইবার আমরা এইভাবে এক এক করে দেখব। So write these things. There are 8 or 9 points according to what do we need to understand. Okay, so the properties of cardiac muscle আমরা যেগুলো দেখব সেগুলো বেশ কিছু পয়েন্ট আছে, লিখতে শুরু করো এক এক করে। নাম্বার 1, contractility। লেখো, এগুলো জিজ্ঞেস করবে what will you see, like in case of human heart, পালসের ক্ষেত্রে আমরা জিজ্ঞেস করি what are the points you will go to notice. So just like you say কি rate, rhythm, axis to ECG তে চলে এলো, পালসের ক্ষেত্রে rate, rhythm, volume, তারপরে হচ্ছে ফোর্স, এগুলো সব থাকে না? ওকে, আরসি স্ট্রাকচার, ভেনাস স্ট্রাকচার, অন্য কোনো অসুবিধা আছে কিনা, জাস্ট লাইক দ্যাট হিয়ার উই উইল বি এবল টু সি 8 points. Contractility, heart contracts, that the main point, if doesn't contract the liver will not go up and down, so contractility. Okay, second, conductivity, electrical circuit দিয়েছি, if the electrical circuit or the conduction is hampered, that means the heart is not working properly. Heart working properly means there will always be electrical conduction, so conductivity. Okay, skin or flesh is very much good conduction both in humans and frogs. 3, contractility হয়ে গেল, conductivity হয়ে গেল, then we will assess the rhythm of it, so rhythmicity. And 4 is your automaticity. Automaticity means if after every, এই যে দেখো এখানে হিউম্যান যে গ্রাফটা আছে, ওকে, this is automatic. Okay, this was actually the before P. Okay, this was the starting of action potential. After the action potential reaches its limit, okay, or threshold, the P wave forms. So just like that, this is automatic. This will end after T and the P will again start the similar way. Okay, so you don't need to put any external emphasis over here to create the next wave or to move the heart onto the next cycle. This is one cardiac cycle, তাই না? এখান থেকে এত অবধি। So for the next cycle you don't need any external motivation, any external stimulus. Okay, it's continuous, it's autonomous. Okay, নিজের থেকেই হয়, like these are internal organs, these are autonomous organs. Okay, you cannot control it, it will happen automatically. So just like that, frog heart is also automatic, it doesn't need a stimulation after every cycle, the cycle is continuous. So automaticity. 4, 5, so these points you can easily understand and you can easily notice. Now a few extra points, like এগুলো আমরা আজকে ডিটেইলে ডিসকাস করব। এক্সট্রা সিস্টোল, with gap, with compensatory gap or compensatory pause. এইটা খুব ভালো করে মনে রাখবে, দিস ইজ ভেরি ইম্পর্টেন্ট, ভেরি কমনলি আস্কড। Systole with compensatory gap or pause. ওকে, এরপরে লেখো অল অর নান ল। ফিক্স ল ছিল তো, অল অর নান ল। আমি অনেকদিন ফিজিক্স পড়িনি। অল অর নান ল কার ছিল? ফিক্সের ছিল। অল অর নান ল। ওকে, 7. After this, staircase effect. Now, these things, a few of these things are exclusive for humans also. Okay, তোমরা এক সেকেন্ডে বুঝতে পারবে কেন। and staircase effect পরে লাস্ট হচ্ছে subminimal summation or summation of subminimal stimuli. Summation of subminimal stimuli. So previous day kalke, okay, I already told them till that, and if there is time we will cover a little bit extra also. Okay, this is optional, either we will do it today or we will do it the next day. Number 9, effects of drugs and ions. Effects of drugs and ions. Okay, so these are the things we will be noticing. Notice these 8 things first, we will be doing it first. Now the thing is, the first point, why do we choose frog and all these other animals? Because we need trials. Okay, we needed trials, we need to understand what human species and the other species, okay, are having similar in the organ system or having different in the organ system, and also we are mammals, they are amphibians, so we need to study other systems also, other systems of the other type of animals, okay, so that we can understand and correlate with each other. And also আগে এই যে frog, guinea pig, rabbits, তারপর যে pigs, এগুলো সব আমাদের ইউজ হতো। Pig's heart was first transplanted, heart transplanted first test কি হার্টে হয়েছিল? Pig's heart. তার আগে before that also sheep's heart was in a testing procedure. So all these animal hearts, of course amphibian heart আমরা দিতে পারবো না, pig since ওটা mammal ছিল বা তোমার ইয়ে ছিল, sheep was mammal, সেই জন্য আমরা দিতে পেরেছি। But for experimental purposes, okay, effect of drugs and all, we will always do that with mouse, with frog in our lab experiment. Then we আমরা assess করি, then আমরা একটা বোঝার চেষ্টা করি যে what will happen if we put it to or provide it to humans. So on experimental purposes, that's why we are using these frogs and other animals. Okay, so main thing is experiment. We need to experiment with all the other. In this year it will be done and dusted, it will never be repeated again, right? So একবারই পড়ানো হবে, একবারই পরীক্ষা হবে, ভালো করে পড়বে, বেশি নাম্বার থাকে না। 10 মার্কস, I think 5 to 10 মার্কস থাকবে প্র্যাকটিক্যালে, 10 মার্কস হয়তো থাকবে, but it is very scoring since this is frog. ওকে, অনেক টিচাররা জাস্ট তুমি বেসিক কিছু উত্তর দিলে ওরা নাম্বার দিয়ে দেবে তোমাকে, ভেরি স্কোরিং সাবজেক্ট। ওকে, this 10 points you can score easily. In case of humans they will ask a lot of questions, but in case of frog they won't ask you a lot of questions, only the questions which are supposed to be asked. Okay, so very limited questions also, not so much. The questions will come from these points only, and a few points may be extra added. Of course there are classes, তোমাদের আরো ক্লাস হবে, সেই ক্লাসে আমরা এক্সট্রা জিনিস বলে দেব। So the thing is, instrument আমরা দেখে নিয়েছি, we have set the frog, and now we will see all of these things. Now the kyograph board has drawn me an structure, that's frog ECG. Frog ECG looks like what? Okay, this gap should not be there. Okay, so this is a basic ECG. Now compare karo human compare korle dekhte pabe, in case of human there are a lot of things, P, Q, R, S, T, all those intervals, all those segments and all, but in case of frog, simplified, very simple organ. Okay, in case of frogs we also saw the structure, very much simple. Oh, একটা জিনিস আমি বলতে ভুলে গেছি, between the atria and ventricle of the heart there are some things called white crescentic lines. White crescentic, CRESCENTIC, white crescentic lines. Okay, সাদা সাদা এখানে লাইন থাকে. These lines are actually the differentiation between the atria and ventricle of the heart. হিউম্যানদের এখানে কি থাকে? atrioventricular septum, right? আর ফ্রগদের ক্ষেত্রে কি থাকে? These white crescentic lines. These lines, white lines will differentiate between atria and ventricle. Okay, so এটা জাস্ট আমি এখানে বলে দিলাম. This will be coming later on, an important structure. So frog heart has two atria, one ventricle, one sinus venosus, which is actually responsible for creating all the impulses and all, and they have also white crescentic lines differentiating their atria from their ventricle. Okay, two atrias and one ventricle. This is basic frog heart structure. Naturally, the structure is so simple. The graphs will also be simple because the mechanism is lot simpler than the humans. So this is actually three parts, like this area. Okay, this area is sinus. If P wave, actually in case of humans, what do you call a sinus rhythm? তোমাদের জিজ্ঞেস করবে sinus tachycardia. We always say that sinus bradycardia. What do you mean by sinus? This sinus term কেন আসে? Okay, the sinus term, you will say if we notice the P wave continuously preceding every QRS. Okay, that is called sinus. If the P wave continuously, like first wave তুমি দেখলে হয়ে গেল, P is there. Second wave তুমি দেখলে again P is there. So in that case you can say, of course this is lead 2. Like I said, this is lead 2, this is not any other lead. So in lead 2, if P wave continuously precedes every QRS, okay, matlab the present if P wave consistently is called that the heart is in sinus rhythm, in okay rhythm. The starting of P wave is there, that means the SA node is actually doing properly. SA node থেকে যে আমার atrial depolarization, it is denoted by that. So the atria is depolarizing and SA node is producing the electrical impulse. So that means the heart is in sinus rhythm. In case of frog heart, the sinus rhythm is located here. In the graph, the sinus rhythm is located here. Okay, ideally যখন আমরা when we do it in very slow process, okay, or very fast process, it may be noticed like this, a little bit of elevation here, but ideally যখন আমরা করি we don't notice it, but the placement is like here, it's denoted as X. Okay, in this case দেখো এখানে যে X, but this is not noted originally. যদি খুব either very fast or very slow we do the ECG on or kyograph in case of frogs, you can notice these things sometimes. Okay, just like T wave আমরা সব সময় অত ভালোভাবে পাই না, কখনো পেতে পারি নাও পেতে পারি, but that doesn't mean that the ventricular repolarization is not happening. It's happening, but sometimes you can get it depending upon the severity of the ECG, depending upon the electrical impulse of the ECG, depending upon how fast you are doing or how fast the heart is beating. Okay, depending upon that you can get the T, okay, perfectly well or not perfectly well, but that doesn't mean that's defective. Similarly, এটা থাকতেও পারে নাও থাকতে পারে, but if this notch isn't present, it doesn't mean the sinus rhythm is not present. Sinus rhythm is here. From here on, there is atrial contraction, and from here on, the ventricular contraction. Okay, so atrial contraction and ventricular contraction. Ventricular contraction happens, then dilatation happens, it comes back to normal. Then again contraction starts. This is until this is atrial contraction. Until this, there is ventricular contraction. This graph goes up means the contraction is happening, and that's why the graph is. যত আমার এখানে contraction হবে, তত আমার সেই লিভার অনুযায়ী আমার লাইন তত বাড়বে, ঠিক সেই রকম ভাবে আমি ওই জন্যই এটা এতটা করে উঠছে। ওকে, atrial contraction, then ventricular contraction, the graph goes up. Dilatation, it comes down to baseline. Then again atrial contraction goes up, ventricular contraction, another notch. Then again dilatation comes down. So that's how এইভাবে আমাদের frog heartটা চলে। atrial contraction, ventricular contraction, dilatation comes down below. এইভাবে আমাদের frog heart একের পর এক চলছে। So this is the basic. Now in this graph, okay, we will be able to relate and we will be able to check all these things from this graph only. আমরা একবার একবার দেখবো, বলো। না, ওরা হিউম্যান আর ফ্রগ আলাদা, আমি তো রিলেট করার জন্য বললাম। ওকে, হ্যাঁ 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 হ্যাঁ, the sinus rhythm is noted here. ওকে, অনেক বইতে দেখবে x হিসাবে এখানে লেখা আছে, but no notch is present here. Now you can see some things you will readily notice. First is contractility. The heart was contracting. That's actually visible over the board itself. The heart is beating and contracting. Now we are seeing all these things in a beating heart. The heart is beating. Heart is beating. Heart is contracting. So the contractility is proved. Contractility proved how? If the heart wasn't contracting enough, a graft type form hobe na because of that lever. So the heart is contracting. Contractility is proven. Conductivity or electrical impulse. Now we are placing those electrodes on both sides of the frog, and we are doing all these things. So conductivity is also proved. If there is no conduction, this graph will not be possible. Okay, so conductivity is proven. Now rhythmicity. Conductivity will be proven later on completely, but you can understand that there is electrical conduction, because if there is no conduction, কি করে আমাদের গ্রাফটা ফর্ম হলো, হবে না। ওকে, rhythmicity. Rhythmicity তোমরা দেখো, if they are in rhythm, just like human আমরা জাজ করি the distance between two QRS, two topmost points, if they are actually continuously around the same duration, ওই যে বক্স গুলো দেখে আমরা ক্যালকুলেট করি, so around the same duration, so we can say that it's in a good rhythm, it's not irrhythmic. Okay, so এখানে দেখো আমাদের রিদমে আছে। This structure, if you notice like this is in rhythm, because দেখো the distance between two ends of here or even two ends of here, they're equal. Okay, and also it's not like that there are two, okay, like this, then there is a gap, then again there are two or three like this. It's not like that. This is irregular, this is arrhythmia. Okay, this is not in rhythm, but these are rhythmic. There is no arrhythmia. If there was arrhythmia, the structure would have look like someone like this. So no arrhythmia, matlab the heart is rhythm also. When the beating heart of a frog is in rhythm, so rhythmicity is proved. Okay, seeing the typical area difference and all, there's not much, it looks equal. Also the elevation of these things are also equal, so every beat is around same contraction level. Okay, not much high. যদি একটা এরকম হতো আর একটা যদি এরকম উপরে উঠে যেত, তাহলে বলতে পারতে যে contraction level is different. But দেখো, in this case every contraction level is almost of same magnitude. হ্যাঁ, তার মানে we can say that heart is beating rhythmically. So rhythmicity is also proved. And automaticity, just like the point আমি হিউম্যানে এক্সপ্লেন করেছিলাম, দেখো একটা শেষ হওয়ার পর শুরু হচ্ছে, there is no gap. ওকে, যেতে তুমি এক্সট্রা পুট করছো তারপর আবার নতুন করে বিট করছে, not like that. The heart is beating continuously. One wave ends, another wave starts automatically. Okay, so automatically after the contraction of ventricle and dilatation of ventricle, automatically the atria again starts contracting. So this is automatic, this is an automatic procedure. আমরা এইখানে বাইরে থেকে কিন্তু কিছু পুট করছি না। Now we will put some things or put some stimulus here outside, which will be followed in this extra systole. Okay, so for now automaticity is proved, it's automatic, we don't need anything. Okay, it will go on and go on continuously until the frog is alive. ঠিক আছে, so this 4 point we can readily prove in a beating heart. Of course heart is beating, matlab you can see if the heart is not beating তোমরা কিছুই দেখতে পারবে না। হার্ট বিট না হলে তো কন্ট্রাক্টিলিটিও থাকবে না, কন্ডাক্টিভিটিও থাকবে না, no rhythm, because heart is not beating. So how will you generate the rhythm also? And also not automatic, because if there was automatic, the heart would have been beating automatically. So in a beating heart these points are accessible, we need to keep the heart beating, and that's why we don't sever those vascular and neuromuscular connections. We preserve the nerves, preserve all the things to notice, to keep the heart beating and working, and we notice all these things. Now last, this 5th point, very important point, extra systole with হচ্ছে কি compensatory gap বা pause. Okay, so you can understand that this is systole, right? This is also systole, this is also systole. So what is the diastole phase? This is your diastole phase, right? This is again your systole, this is again your systole, and this is your diastole phase. Systole মানে contraction হচ্ছে, the graph is going up, pressure is going up, graph is going up. Okay. Again, this is your systole and this is your diastole. So extra systole means you will notice another episode of systole if you provide some stimulus in a specific area. Now you have to know about a certain thing that is called, এবারে আমরা এখানে this is also we are noticing in a beating heart. If it's heart not beating, how will the systole and diastole, all those things come? Now you'll have to understand about some things which is called refractory period. Okay, what is refractory period? In case of humans also there is a refractory period. Okay, in case of cardiac muscles, in case of smooth muscles, in case of skeletal muscles, in all those muscles there is a refractory period. Refractory period means the time difference or the time between contraction and complete dilation. So any structure is first contracting, okay, contracting, then after some time it's dilated. Any structure, okay. Suppose it's a vessel, so any structure, now this contraction when it happens and when the complete dilatation happens, the between time, okay, the time in between is called as transition time or refractory period. Refractory period. Okay. Now this refractory period has two parts. One is absolute refractory period and relative refractory period. Okay. Relative. Why absolute and why relative? Now this is absolute refractory period. Absolute refractory period means if you put any kind of external stimulus onto that heart or onto the structure from outside, it will not show any kind of extra changes. But in case of relative refraction, okay, in case of relative refraction, it will definitely show some changes. Now in case of various muscles, okay, like cardiac muscles, skeletal muscles, various organs, in case of various organs and muscles, bolo. Okay, absolute refractory period is when, now first dalo eta bolchi ekhoni bolchi, the refractory period is different in every other organs and every other muscles. Okay, if the heart contracts, it won't readily dilate or it won't take the same time for dilation as our other organs like our skeletal muscles or our other muscles. Okay, so there are different in different parts. Now what is refractory period? Refractory period is the difference of time or the time in between one contraction and complete dilation. This has two parts, one is absolute and one is relative. So absolute refractory period and relative refractory period. Absolute refractory period means the period in which when you can put in stimulus, like in this meantime, suppose you are putting another stimulus, okay, another stimulus. Now two things can happen, it can react or it doesn't react. It completely depends upon in which period of time, okay, you are putting this stimulus from outside. Okay, now this absolute refractory period is when the cell, okay, doesn't react to your stimulus. That means it is in absolute refractory period, a period where it doesn't take any stimulus and act like it or act through it. But in some cases it may get contracted more, like you are putting a stimulus here, okay, in this time in between, and it reacts, it either contracts or does something, any kind of change happening, any kind of reaction happening to this muscle, will call it then that the process is in relative refractory period. Okay, because there is relative refraction, you can see some changes or some reactions of the cell. বুঝতে পারলে অ্যাবসলিউট আর রিলেটিভ এর মানে? অ্যাবসলিউট মানে হচ্ছে কোনোভাবেই তোমার বাইরে থেকে স্টিমুলাস দিলে চেঞ্জ হবে না, সিম্পল, সেই জন্য ওটাকে আমরা অ্যাবসলিউট বলছি। আর রিলেটিভ বলছি কারণ কিছু একটা চেঞ্জ দিলে, স্টিমুলাস দিলে চেঞ্জ হয়ে যাবে, সেই জন্য আমরা ওটাকে রিলেটিভ বলছি। রিলেটিভ রিফ্র্যাক্টরি পিরিয়ড, ধরো এখানে 10 মিনিট আছে, 10 মিনিটের মধ্যে 6 মিনিট আমার অ্যাবসলিউট রিফ্র্যাকশন, 4 মিনিট আমার রিলেটিভ রিফ্র্যাকশন, তার মানে ওই 6 মিনিটের মধ্যে যদি আমি বাইরে থেকে স্টিমুলাস দিই ইট উইল নট রিঅ্যাক্ট, অ্যাবসলিউট বলেছি। তাহলে আমরা ওই লাস্ট 4 মিনিটের মধ্যে যদি আমি কিছু দিই তাহলে ওর রিঅ্যাকশন করবে। সো দ্য 4 মিনিট ইজ ইন দিস কেস, so in that particular cell or in that particular organ cell 4 minute is relative and 6 minute is absolute, so the ratio is 6:4. every refractory period has these two parts. এবার বুঝতে পারলে ক্লিয়ার করে? ওকে, বুঝতে না পারলে নেটিভ ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে আমি এক্সপ্লেন করে দেবো, বাংলা হিন্দি ইংরেজি তিনটেই আমি ঠিকঠাক বলতে পারি, সো কোনো প্রবলেম নেই। যে কোনো ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে জিজ্ঞেস করবে ইউ ক্যান আস্ক মি এনি ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ, যেমন বাংলায় বললাম একবারে বুঝে গেল, হতেই পারে ইংরেজিতে কিছু একটা প্রবলেম হচ্ছিল। এনিহাউ দিস ইজ আ basic thing you have to notice. Okay, in case of humans also there are refractory periods. Okay, now there comes the very important thing. In case of cardiac muscle, this refractory period difference is very much, and in case of skeletal muscle there is a difference. Okay, so in case of cardiac muscle এখানে রেশিওটা জিজ্ঞেস করতে পারে, ঠিক আছে? স্কেলেটাল মাসেলের ক্ষেত্রে রিলেটিভ এন্ড অ্যাবসলিউট রিফ্র্যাক্টরি পিরিয়ড, so in case of cardiac muscles this relative is 20% and absolute is 80%. Okay, so that the time, the total refractory period, this is total refractory period. So in case of total refractory period, the cardiac muscles has a ratio of 20% of relative refraction and 80% of absolute refraction. Okay, and so when the cardiac muscles are dilating and all, in only 20% of the time, so if it takes 10 minutes, okay, only within 2 minutes of time you can have some things or some stimulus which can affect cardiac muscle, but 80% of the time you won't get any reaction from the cardiac muscle. But in case of skeletal muscle, okay, তোমরা দেখতেই পাবে skeletal muscle ধরো আমরা অলরেডি কন্ট্রাক্ট করেছি, ঠিক আছে? কন্ট্রাক্ট করার পর আমাদের একটু ছেড়ে আবার আমি কন্ট্রাক্ট করতে পারি, it will contract, but cardiac muscle won't do that. cardiac muscle কে যদি নিজের ইচ্ছা মতো আমরা কন্ট্রাক্ট করতে পারি দেন আমরা ডিজিজে পড়ে যাব। ওকে, cardiac muscle is autonomous, নিজের মতো করতে পারে, so relative refraction period is very less. One second I will explain. Now in this case এটা আমি লিখে নিই আগে, this relative refraction in case of হচ্ছে গিয়ে skeletal muscles are actually 66%. Okay, 2/3, and in case of only 1/3, so 33%. So what is the difference and what is the significance of it? Now, so তার মানে কি, in case of skeletal muscles you can have a longer period of time when you can, okay, stimulate the skeletal muscle and it will react. দেখো 66% refractory period হচ্ছে relative refractory period time, 66%. That means around this 10 minutes you can have stimulus and the skeletal muscle will react in 6.6 minutes, around 6.6 minutes you are getting, okay, to either motivate or stimulate it or to inhibit it, any kind of inhibition, stimulation, any kind of action you are getting in around 6.6 minutes in case of a skeletal muscle. Only in case of 3 minutes it will not react because the only 3 minutes is absolute refraction, but in case of cardiac muscle 80% is absolute refraction. So only within this 2 minute of window in case of cardiac muscle you can have any changes in those muscle fiber. So difference ta khayal koro, in case of cardiac muscle this time period is only 2 minutes, 10 minutes if we think this total period is, but in case of skeletal muscle this time is 6.6 minutes, more than 6 minutes, so more than 6.5 minutes. So is it more easy to stimulate the cardiac muscle or skeletal muscle? Which is more easy? Skeletal muscle is more easy because it gives us more time. Okay, and that's what is important. That's why cardiac muscle is cannot be titanized easily titanized kora jay na, because involuntarily it moves and we cannot affect it as much. We don't have as now আমি এটা 10 মিনিট করে দেখছি, but ideally the total cardiac cycle of a human takes how many time? Very good, 0.8 second. তবে 0.8 সেকেন্ডের মধ্যে একটা রিফ্র্যাক্টরি পিরিয়ড থাকবে, তার মধ্যে 20%, মানে বুঝতে পারছো কত কম সময়। ওকে, But the skeletal muscle, of course, not 0.8 seconds. Skeletal muscle has a circle of a much more time, and also it has much more time to have effects with outside stimulus. So from those 0.8 ওর মধ্যে একটা refractory period is there, and 20% of that period, that's very less, that's negligible, and ওইটুকুর মধ্যে only when you are providing a stimulus within that small episode of time, only then the cardiac muscle will change, okay, change what it was doing, okay. So that's why it's very much difficult for us to stimulate the cardiac muscle externally, কারণ যদি আমরা স্টিমুলেট করতে পারতাম ইজিলি আমরা অন্যকে মেরে দিতে পারতাম, তাই তো? হ্যাঁ, আমরা স্টিল মারতে পারি, বাট ওই রিফ্র্যাক্টরি পিরিয়ড ইউজ করে we cannot kill any person, or of course the heart muscle cannot be affected. Sometimes kill এর জন্যও নয়, we are smoking, we are running, every time our heart is affected, everything is stimulus. এবার এই যে রেস্টিং স্টেটে আমি এখানে আছি, this is normal, আমি এক্ষুনি if I walk from this area to this area and come back, this is a stimulus to my heart. Anything that stimulates your heart is a stimulus. But does our heart die? Is it overworked? No, it can manage itself, because this our time period is very less, because whatever change I am doing, it most probably comes under this absolute reflection. So the stimulus is coming, but the heart muscle, cardiac muscle, is in absolute refractory period 80% of the time, and that's why even if the stimulus comes, বুকে কেউ জোরে ঘুষি মেরে দিল, লেগে গেল, সেটাও একটা স্টিমুলাস, হার্টের উপরে কুপিন ফুটিয়ে দিল, সেটাও একটা স্টিমুলাস, but the cardiac muscle will try to withhold itself, because 80% of the time it is in absolute refraction period and no change can be happening, okay. So even if we put anything here, stimulus here, no change will be happening, cardiac muscle will readjust themselves. That's why cardiac muscle are very hard to tetanize, okay. In case of practical তোমাদের এই কোশ্চেনটা জিজ্ঞেস করতে পারে, why is cardiac muscles or why are cardiac muscles not tetanized as much? skeletal muscle এ কিন্তু টিটেনি রেগুলার হতে পারে, তোমরা দেখবে টিটেনাস হয়, ওকে. skeletal muscle has very high frequency of tetany, but cardiac muscle never tetanizes. একবার টিটেনাইজ হলেই আমরা মরে যাব, তাই তো? টিটেনাইজ হওয়া মানে আমার কন্ট্রাকশন স্টপ হয়ে যাওয়া, মরে যাব আমরা, আমাদের 1 second, even if 1 microsecond heart stops, we will be dead, তাই না? So cardiac muscle cannot or should not be tetanized, and আমরা physiologically we are getting this fail safe mechanism, because the body itself doesn't allow very much time for the outside effects to react. বডিও বলছে ঠিক আছে, I'll protect itself, right? এতক্ষণে কনসেপ্টটা বোঝা গেল? So this is a hard concept for you to grasp, that's why এতক্ষণ ধরে বোঝালাম. I think now you have understood the basics of it. Now what is the importance? আমরা এখানে দেখব রিফ্র্যাক্টরি পিরিয়ডটা, এবার আমরা ফ্রগে দেখব. We'll say it, we'll provide outside stimulus in various stages of this graph, and we will notice if there is any changes, if the absolute and relative refraction, true for frog's heart also. In case of human heart it's true, but in case of frog heart, does the amphibian cardiac cycle or amphibian cardiac muscles follow this property as well as humans? It's everything about comparing the two different species, okay. আমরা কম্পেয়ার করছি, তো কম্পেয়ার করে আমরা দেখব যে এদের ক্ষেত্রে কি হচ্ছে. So in case of frogs, we are providing a stimulus here, one stimulus here, and one stimulus here, okay, 3 stimulus. So one stimulus while the atria contracts, one stimulus while the ventricle contracts, and one stimulus, okay, and one ventricle contracts, and one stimulus after the dilatation, okay, starting of atrial contraction. So we will provide 3 stimulus. So the first stimulus আমরা যদি দিই, we will notice this graph. No change, okay. Pardon my drawing, but no change. You should see no change, okay. এটা জাস্ট আমার ড্রয়িংটার জন্য বেশি হয়ে গেছে. কোনো চেঞ্জ হয় না. So no change when I am putting it in A. So area A, no change. Area V also won't show much change যদি তুমি পয়েন্টে দাও, ঠিক আছে. it will also show area V also no change. So no change here, no change here. Now we are putting another here. ঠিক আছে, এটাকে আমরা সাপোজ y point বলে ডিনোট করছি because x is already there. So in case of point y after the dilatation also there is no change. Also there is no change in case of this y point. Okay, so in case of y point there is also no change. The only change comes when we are putting stimulus in this area. Okay, so this is our refractory period. ঠিক আছে, why? Because this is our refractory period. Here the construction or constriction is complete constriction is happening. And from here on again the constriction is happening. So around this is period of complete dilation. The heart is dilating and that's why the curve is coming down. ঠিক আছে, heart is dilating so the curve is coming down. So this is the dilatation period. If this is the dilatation period, this is the point of complete dilation. After that constriction will again start. So this is the episode of complete dilation. So this contraction, atrial contraction, এই এক এক করে ফলো আমাকে কি হচ্ছে, একটা ফ্রগের হার্ট আমি আঁকছি, এই ড্র করছি. What is happening in this first graph? What is happening? Atrial systole. Very good. Systole কথাটা আমার ইউজ করা উচিত. Thanks. Contraction কথাটা ইউজ করা উচিত না. Second, what is happening now? Ventricular systole. So these are systoles. The heart is contracting. Okay, and that's why during this systole there is no refractory period. Refractory period is after the heart is constricting properly or into systole, proper systole is done. Okay, after that between complete dilatation. Now the heart is dilating. So what is this point? After ventricular dilation, after diastole and just before the starting of the next systolic cycle. তাই তো, from here on again the atria will start contracting and atrial systole will start. So this is your point of complete dilation and this is your point of complete constriction. Okay, atria already constricted, ventricle constricted, complete constriction, complete dilation. So the refractory period in case of frog heart is denoted by, বোঝা গেল এই জায়গাটা দিয়ে. Now among this time, okay, frog heart তুমি যদি এইখানে দাও কোনো চেঞ্জ আমরা এই ডাউন এরিয়াতে কোনো চেঞ্জ আমরা দেখিনি, টপ এরিয়াতেও আমরা কোনো চেঞ্জ দেখিনি, রাইট? Only change you will notice in case of this area, somewhere in between. Okay, so in here if we provide a stimulus the graph now looks like this. So this is a systole, now we will notice an extra systolic episode. Okay, all of this talking to make you understand only this thing. Okay, of course এটা important কারণ 3 নাম্বার ওই হচ্ছে কি 3 marks explain why comes, why the cardiac muscle is not titannized. So the refractory period you will have to make use and write that property. Anyhow, now when we are putting any stimulus here, what will happen? So the heart is contracting, first atrial systole, we are providing stimulus here, no change, কোনো change হচ্ছে না. Now ventricular systole, we are providing another stimulus here, no change. Now ventricular diastole or total atrial diastole, ventricular diastole, both are happening. The heart is getting dilated. Okay, so in this case from here amra again we are putting another stimulus. Now the funny thing is goes again like this and comes down. So this episode, this is extra systole. দেখো whenever I put an stimulus around here, এখানে কোনো চেঞ্জ হয়নি, এখানে কোনো আবার আমি will put another here, again no change, it goes and it starts the next atrial systole. Again we put an stimulus here, again it will show. Now only once we cannot prove, we have to prove it multiple times. Second, again it comes down. Okay, every point we are providing stimulus. Okay, and it's acting like this, not like this. এখানে আমরা করেছি. So every point we are providing stimulus acting like this. Now we are not providing stimulus at all. will notice the heart come back like this, but not exactly this. The next graph will have a much higher ventricular contraction. কোনটা মাছ হাই কেন হলো বুঝতে পারছি না। ওকে ওমা এতক্ষণ ধরে যা বকবক করলাম সেটাই হলো। কি করলাম? we are putting stimulus here. এখানে স্টিমুলাস দিলে কোনো চেঞ্জ হবে? is this the refractory period? The refractory period is in that area, and তার মধ্যেও there is a special area, only certain amount of time in between which there is this relative refraction, and only then we can change, that we can notice the changes. এখানে কোনো চেঞ্জ হয়নি, heart is going on. Now we are putting external stimulus here, then the heart reacts because this area is within your refractory period, within your relative refractory period, and that's why the heart is contracting again. Relative refraction এর আন্ডারে যদি তুমি স্টিমুলাস দাও, the heart is bound to react, তাই না? So it's reacting, it's contracting again. Exactly, and that's why it is called extra systole, right? This systole is not normal, this is an extra, সেই জন্যই নামটা এসছে। এবার ক্লিয়ার হলো? ঠিক আছে, তো দিস ইজ এক্সট্রা সিস্টোল। নাও এবার তুমি দেখো, we are putting stimulus in every possible point, but only this point around this area, okay, it is reacting around। এখানে দেখো একটু উপরে দিয়েছি একটু নিচে দিয়েছি, because around this area only it has that time frame where the relative refraction is coinciding with the graph, and only because of that the heart is contracting. নাহলে আমার এখানেও তো হতে পারতো, এখানেও তো হতে পারতো। আবার দেখো আমরা যদি একটু নিচে দিই, এরকম জায়গায় দিই, তাও কিন্তু there will be no change because the refractory period has passed, absolute refraction is passed, sorry, the relative refraction is passed. Now there is a time, this is also refractory period, but this is your absolute refractory period, and that's why no change will happen. Only the area in which this relative refraction period was present, only then the change will happen. Okay, so এই জন্য there is an extra systole. Now আরেকটা শব্দ আমি এখানে লিখেছিলাম, with compensatory gap or compensatory pause, বলো। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ এই তো আসছি তো। Now compensatory gap is, you will have a gap like this. Okay, now why, কেন তুমি compensatory গ্যাপটা পাচ্ছ সেটা জানার জন্য হচ্ছে তোমাকে বুঝতে হবে কি হচ্ছে। So whatever is happening, there is an extra systole. Extra systole happening matlab your ventricle is getting even more dilated, right? Ventricle is getting dilated, there is an extra systole, and ventricle is not getting completely dilated before 1 second consistently. So following this, the ventricle must have more time to dilate, অনেক বেশিক্ষণ ধরে dilate হয়েছে। First systole, then another ventricular systole, then another ventricular systole. So by both ventricular systole, the ventricles are pumping more blood than usual, and so when they will dilate also more. They will have more space between them, and more space between them means the heart will take more time to come back into its original position and make the atria contract. And also the atria is not contracting, atria is also getting a little bit of time here, okay, because of that maximal contraction, the maximum systole, because of that one extra systole, the heart was getting a little bit more time, okay, to again contract, and in this meantime the ventricle have more time to dilate. And also যখনই ventricle একটা forcefully extra contraction হওয়ার পর, after any extra forceful contraction, the ventricle dilates and it has more time to dilate. দেখো before atrial contraction there is a more time because the heart was very much contracted, okay, very much in systole, complete systole. It takes a little bit of time for the atria to again regain its composure and start getting contracted. So that's why the ventricle, দেখো টাইমিংটা দেখো, the ventricle is getting dilated for lot more time. In this area the ventricle was getting dilated only around this period, but after that the ventricle is getting dilated. This is again ventricular contraction, so ventricle is getting dilated, the time is very much more in this case rather than this case. In this case, the timing was only this amount of time. But in this case, the time is like very much higher. So the ventricle is getting more time to get filled. So the ventricle has more blood now inside. So if ventricle has more blood now inside, is it normal for heart to keep the blood? No. Whatever blood accumulates, the heart will pump and heart will make it go out. And that's why this next contraction needs to be bigger. And basic blood jama hoye ache na. If more blood is stored, the heart will need one more contraction. Okay, one contraction, very high contraction, very powerful systole, so that it can pump all those extra bloods accumulating in this given extra time. So it pumps more, and then again the graph comes back to normal. Why? Because now there is no more extra blood. Ja extra blood chilo ami to bar kore diyechi. Now again the heart doesn't need to contract much more, so it comes back to the normal level. Ei je normal level abar fire elo. So this is your extra systole with compensatory gap and pause, exclusively studied in case of amphibian physiology, cardiac physiology. Now you can ask, what is the relation in relation with the humans? Of course we have the relation. Amra jokhon ekhane anything we do, like the examples I have created, we are smoking, we are standing, we are walking, whatever we are doing, we are moving our heart or body from a resting position. Okay, everything, any harmful effect we do, any extra effect we do, it is affecting our heart. It's affecting our heart, and this extra systole is very much common in chain smokers. Okay, in case of person who have high BP, who have definite anxiety, অনেকেই আছে সামান্য জিনিসে প্রচুর টেনশন নিয়ে ফেলে, so the anxious person, all those will have an extra systole. Okay, in case of humans also, but normally আমরা নোটিস করি না, because very খুব সামান্য সময়ের জন্য হয়. Okay, and only in that period, that extra systole, only at that time, at exactly that time episode, if you do an ECG, you can notice the systole. But ওটা তো আমাদের পক্ষে possible নয়. And when we go to a cardiology or go to a ECG, we usually try to keep calm and all, and that's why only that time period it's not always possible to get this in human graph. But ideally, one episode of systole, extra systole, 2 episodes of extra systole occasionally can happen when we are putting our heart in much pressure. বুঝতে পেরেছো? So this is the relation with humans. Humans এর এরকম হয়, and also remember, in case of humans the time period is very less. Only 20% of our refractory period, which is all accumulated within 0.8 seconds. So it's very tough to get that extra systole onto the graph. Exactly ওইটুকু টাইমের মধ্যে ECG ওইখানে করা পসিবল হয় না, ঠিক আছে? So that's why we don't get it in the graph, but this phenomena is also happening in the humans, ঠিক আছে? So extra systole and compensatory gap কেন হয়, তোমাদের যদি এখন জিজ্ঞেস করে পরীক্ষায়, বলতে পারবে ঠিকঠাক, মোটামুটি এক্সপ্লেন করে দিতে পারবে, what is extra systole, what is compensatory gap, why this. Okay, now this graph has a particular name, this big graph has a particular name. This is something called as, okay, the name is not that much easy, but you can relate, post extrasystolic potential, ঠিক আছে? Easy, extra systole holo, then so post extrasystolic, this is nothing but potential. Okay, so this high gap is called post extrasystolic potential or potentiation. In some books it's called as potentiation. Whatever term you are using, it's okay. Post extrasystolic, extrasystole, post extrasystolic potential or post extrasystolic potentiation. Okay, ঠিক আছে, বুঝতে পারলে? ব্যাস এই হচ্ছে। নাও এবার আমরা এক এক করে এইগুলো দেখব, ঠিক আছে? all or none law, stair, the main hard things are completed. Okay, so we'll be seeing all or none law, staircase and summation of subminimal stimuli. এই তিনটে আমরা দেখব, and effects of drugs will be taught in next class, because it's already 12:15, 12:20. Anyhow, all or none law of Fick's indicates either it will happen or it will not happen. Just like switching off the lights or switching on the lights, either it will get on or either it will get off, except some voltage problems and all, if you notice. Otherwise the mechanism is pretty simple. You turned on a switch, either it will keep on or it will keep shut. It will not, get on despite your very much time. So anyhow, this is all or none law of fix. What will you do? In this case, we will be noticing if heartbeat is not the beat, if the graph is noticeable or not. আমরা এখানে কিভাবে করি, কিভাবে বুঝি? You should remember there is a action potential. যখন তোমরা হার্ট পড়েছিলে, there was generation of action potential which actually needed to reach a threshold. তাই তো একটা threshold ছিল. If the action potential doesn't reach the threshold, the contraction of the systole will not start. এটা তোমরা অলরেডি পড়ে নিয়েছো, তোমাদের threshold নিয়ে কোশ্চেনও আসে, ঠিক আছে? সো আমরা এখানে স্টিমুলাস পুট করব. In case of frog heart, we will put the stimulus sub threshold. Okay, threshold এর থেকে নিচে. After a point, we are providing sub threshold stimulus. Nothing will happen. Then we are providing something which is threshold stimulus. Suddenly it comes alive. Then again we will put another sub threshold. It will keep on. So you notice that phenomena. এখানে আবার আমরা একটা করছি, এখানে একটা দিই, এখানে একটা threshold stimulus দিই, just to make it look good and nothing else. Anyhow, এখানে দেখো, whenever I am putting any sub threshold stimulus, nothing is happening, and once I cross the threshold, it will show. Okay, it will show. And the important thing is, now think about it. এখানে আমরা এগুলো সব মুছে দিই, okay, and this sub threshold আমরা মুছে দিচ্ছি, ঠিক আছে? So now we will be putting a threshold stimulus. It's happening. Now আমরা এখানে দেব hyper threshold stimulus. Okay, a threshold very much more, okay, more than the threshold. What will happen? It will not change. The intensity will remain the same. Force of contraction will remain the same. Again, we are putting another extra threshold. Okay, another stimulus more than the threshold. Okay, the same. Now, in this case, we will be taking this quiescent heart or dead heart or quiescent heart or not beating heart. So that এই জন্য দেখো মাঝখানে দেখো এই জন্য এখানে গ্যাপ. This is not continuous. We are putting a stimulus, only after that it was contracting. So these things are done in a quiescent heart. Quiescent spelling তোমরা চেক করবে, আমার ওটা ভুল হয় বলে আমি লিখছি না. Quiescent, ঠিক আছে? বাংলা লিখে রাখা দরকার হলে পরে ইংলিশ চেক করবে. Anyhow, now you notice, and this is also normal threshold. This is also again normal threshold. So whatever I am putting below threshold or sub threshold stimulus, it's not happening. We are putting threshold stimulus, it's happening. We are putting hyper threshold stimulus, it's happening, but not happening much. এই যে এখানে এক্সট্রা হচ্ছে না. It's actually maintaining the same force of contraction. So this is all or none law. Either হবে নয়তো হবে না. এমন না যে হলে বেশি হলো বা ইন্টেন্সিটি চেঞ্জ হয়ে গেল, নাথিং লাইক দ্যাট। ওকে, আমি যদি সুইচ একটু জোরে প্রেস করি, ওকে, এমন কি হয় যে লাইট বেশি জোরে জ্বলছে? না। আমি যদি একদম আলতু করে এভাবেও সুইচটা জ্বালাই, সেম জ্বলবে। আবার যদি এরকম মেরে চালাই, তাহলেও সেম ভাবে জ্বলবে। সেম থিং, all or none. Either it will happen or it will not happen, but no change in intensity. Even if we put very much hyper threshold stimulus, it will not change its intensity. So this proves that amphibian heart follows this all or none law. এটা আমরা প্রুফ হয়ে গেল, এটা আমরা অলরেডি দেখেছি। So we are putting right marks of what we have seen already. So the explanation is also done, the test is also done. ঠিক আছে, কিভাবে করা হয় all or none law test আমরা এইভাবে করতে শিখবো। This indicates that the cardiac muscles are only responsible and they actually automate their force of contraction and all. ঠিক আছে, this is an automatic procedure also. This is also another reasoning of their automaticity, কে নিজে থেকেই হচ্ছে, আইদার হবে নয়তো হবে না, আমি বাইরে থেকে খুব বেশি ইনক্রিজ করতে পারবো না। ওকে, until and unless I put my stimulus in that extra threshold territory, in that territory, okay, in that relative diffraction territory, only then I can change, because in that time period the stimulus will change, otherwise it will not change anything. And on case of threshold, we are trying to starting the procedure in case of a dead heart. so it will not do anything extra. All or none law is done. Now staircase effect. Staircase effect is increasing the stimuli of force of contraction little by little. Okay. Now another thing, we put threshold stimulus. Threshold stimulus, heartbeats. We put another thing, okay, force of contraction এখন আমরা বাড়াচ্ছি, okay, so increasing the force of contraction will increase it a little bit. From outside we are putting more force, okay. Threshold stimulus টা আমরা threshold ই রেখেছি, but we are putting even more force, okay. So it will, but after you increase it for 2-3 times or a few times, it will not increase further, okay. So first আমি আরো ছোট একটা বানাই। So দেখো, if we increase the force of contraction, okay, এখানে আমরা threshold stimulus এ কোনো চেঞ্জ করছি না, but we are increasing the force of contraction, okay. So if we are increasing the force of contraction, it will only increase as such, and after that it will come to plateau. PLATU, plateau মানে হচ্ছে plane, okay, a plateau. So this is like a staircase, and then after it comes to a plateau, just like সিঁড়িতে আমরা খানিকটা উঠি, তারপরে একটা প্লেন থাকে, then again আবার একটা সিঁড়িতে উঠি, একটা প্লেন থাকে. So this is your staircase effect. Why? Because this force of contraction, okay, gets saturated. কেন? Because you all know that সেই যে সার্কোমিয়ার ছিল, টি টিবিউল, the sarcomere কি রিলিজ করতো ওরা? ক্যালসিয়াম আয়ন রিলিজ করতো. So those calcium ion actually were helping the heart muscle to contract. So when you are increasing the force of contraction one by one, okay, already those cardiac muscles actually coming from sarcoplasmic reticulum, okay, first whenever you are putting a threshold, okay, the sarcoplasmic reticulum releases calcium. So calcium is released in the cardiac cells. Now when you are taking it back, it again comes back to normal, okay, zero, comes back to zero, but the calcium, all the calciums are released inside the cell, cannot go back to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Suppose এখানে 100 টাও ক্যালসিয়াম রিলিজ করেছিল, okay, suppose 85 goes into, but not all, 10 to 15 will still remain. Just a graphical representation, not this percentage are not true, but just to make you understand, okay, a few of them will still remain inside the cell. Now এক এক করে যদি আমি force of contraction বাড়াই, okay, one by one if we increase the force of contraction slowly, the calcium will come out, and again some extra calcium will be retaining there, and other will go inside. So in this case, slowly the calcium, intracellular calcium is slowly increasing, you can see now, because from every contraction or from every force of contraction or from every threshold, okay, from the sarcomere, from the T tubule or from the sarcomere, the calcium is getting released, and some part of it are getting retained inside of the cardiac cell, and that's how the calcium accumulation inside the cell is slowly increasing with every force, okay. Now after some time, this calcium itself is enough, আলাদা করে আর সার্কিমিয়ার থেকে দিতে হচ্ছে না. Now this calcium itself is enough, and thus it already reaches a threshold. Beneath that you cannot contract it, okay, it reaches an extreme limit. After that saturation, just like neuromuscular junction saturation, তাই তো ওখানে হচ্ছে অ্যাসিটাইল কোলিন একটা লেভেলের পর রিলিজ তুমি যতই বাড়াও, it will not cause any kind of extra stimulation or extra transfer of your data, okay. In that case data, or you can see, হ্যাঁ data আমি বলছি, okay, dataই, that memory and all whatever. So no extra stimulation, no extra change in data, okay, it will remain saturated, okay. So in that case, that's how the sarcoplasmic reticulum doesn't, the calcium doesn't go back all the way to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. পরিষ্কার তোমাকে জিজ্ঞেস করবে, explanation you will have to say, okay. What you will say is, sir, after every force of contraction, the T tubule, okay, this is all related to human physiology. The same mechanism follow হয়. So we can notice that. So that's why you can see the staircase effect. এখানে কিছুটা calcium রয়ে গেছিল, সো অলরেডি যখন আমার ক্যালসিয়াম রিলিজ হচ্ছে, সেই ক্যালসিয়ামটা যেহেতু বেড়ে যাচ্ছে, সেই জন্যে, নাহলে আইডিয়ালি তো আগের বারও তো আমরা থ্রেশহোল্ড বাড়িয়ে দিচ্ছিলাম। Why didn't any change happen? Okay, why all or none law was followed? In this case, for every force of contraction, the calcium retaining is actually making this go up, because already কিছু ক্যালসিয়াম ছিল, আবারও এখান থেকে 100টা রিলিজ করলো, so now there is 110 calcium because the 10 was left, so naturally the force will increase. Again আবার এখানে ধরো এবারে 20-25টা রয়ে গেছে, again it will release 100, so now it is 125, so more calcium, more contraction. এই জন্য এখানে staircase effect দেখা যাচ্ছে. Now after some time, suppose it reaches 150, now the threshold is 150, 150 এর পরে তুমি 170, 180, 120, 190, 210, whatever calcium you may give, okay, since it reaches a saturation, it cannot constrict or cannot contract the cells more, so that সেই জন্য আমার প্লেটু চলে আসছে, ঠিক আছে? হ্যাঁ, accumulation হয়ে হয়ে saturation হয়ে গেছে, because every time little bit of calcium was left behind. আর সেই জন্য আর কেন তাহলে এখানে প্রত্যেকবার বাড়ছে বোঝা যাচ্ছে, because of the extra calcium left behind, তাই না? ঠিক, so this is your staircase effect. Staircase effect also you understood. One thing left, summation of subminimal stimuli. Now we will provide a lot of stimuli, okay? Now we are putting stimuli one by one. Suppose এই যে হার্ট এখানে যাচ্ছে, so we are putting one subminimal. What is subminimal stimuli? Again it's subthreshold, because minimal stimuli needed, okay, minimal stimuli needed to make a heart beat, you are putting below that, so the heart will not beat. Suppose this is subminimal stimuli 1, then you are putting another stimuli here, that's stimuli 2, then you are putting another stimuli here, stimuli 3. Now you are so slowly you are increasing this force of stimuli, okay, and finally once it will constrict and the heart will go on. Now the thing is, this force of contraction is equal to is S1 plus S2 plus S3. So when heart finally will contract, it will not only represent the force of the stimuli 3, it will represent all the previous stimuli, because this stimuli will be, supposedly this stimuli is, apparently this stimuli is stored, and when the heart constricts, it takes up all the stimuli and the total force of contraction is applied, so the force will be very much more. So this is what is summation of subminimal stimuli. The name may have sounded very much big and difficult, but এখন বোঝা গেল, nothing, is just a translation of a sentence, summation of subminimal stimuli. So this is also a property which is noticed in frog heart. When the heart will finally get stimulated, all the previous subminimal stimuli will be calculated and it will accumulate and it will create that force totally. So Fc is equal to this S1, this S2 and S3, every S being one subminimal stimuli applied beforehand, which actually didn't cause the heart to beat. ঠিক আছে, আর এটা বোঝা যাচ্ছে যে we are doing it in case of dead heart. From all or none law we are providing or we are doing it in dead heart, because until extra systole there was continuous going and we are providing any stimuluses here and there and we are noticing all the changes. But in case of from this all or none law, তোমরা দেখো normally we are getting this graph only when we are providing a stimulation, only then it goes up and down like that. So that means the heart is normally dead, we are providing stimuluses for the sake of our experiment. So dead heart আর quiescent, quiescent heart and beating heart both are used. beating heart এ আমরা এই লাইফ ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্স গুলো দেখি, dead heart এ আমরা এক্সট্রা ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্স গুলো দেখি, ঠিক আছে? So this is your amphibian heart, a lot to take on, because আমিও এটা জীবনে কখনো পড়িনি, আমাদের ফিজিওলজি প্র্যাকটিক্যালে কখনো পড়ানো হয়নি, so I am also reading it for the first time, so সেই জন্য পড়াতেও একটু টাইম লেগেছে. Previous day I couldn't finish everything, I left this effect of drugs and ions, and of course I think এর মধ্যে যদি আবার আমি ড্রাগস আয়ন পড়াই হবে না, তোমাদেরও মাথা খারাপ হয়ে যাবে, আমার কোনো প্রবলেম নেই, আমার তো নোট রেডি আছে, বাট এটা আমি পরের দিন পড়াবো। এগুলো তোমরা একবার রিডিং দিয়ে এসো, এগুলো যদি বুঝতে পারো। এই এফেক্ট অফ ড্রাগ মানে কি, এই will put drugs in various stages of this graph now. Now if you don't understand the graph and these properties, তোমরা একবারে গুলিয়ে ফেলবে। সো আগে একবার পড়ে আসো এই জিনিসটা, তারপর আমরা পরের দিন এই এফেক্ট অফ ড্রাগস আমরা ডিসকাস করব, ঠিক আছে? এই যেমনি আমরা স্টিমুলাই দিয়েছি অমনি আমরা একটু ক্যালসিয়াম দেবো, একটু পটাশিয়াম দেবো, একটু অ্যাসিটাইল কোলিন দিয়ে দেবো, দিয়ে দেখবো হিউম্যান হার্টে কিরম এফেক্ট হচ্ছে, তার সাথে কি মিল আছে, ঠিক আছে?